I met a really interesting young woman today here in Boston, Massachusetts. And like so many women, she was helping a friend through her breast cancer journey. And she went home and said to her husband, I just can't believe such a young woman was diagnosed with breast cancer. And with that, she said, you know what? Maybe I should check myself. And with that, she did a self-breast exam. All right, Tara, let's take you back to when you first got diagnosed, because I think you were only 32.
That's right.
So you weren't at a time in your life where you would have been going in for mammograms.
No.
And was there any breast cancer in your family? So you had
None.
no reason to suspect this.
No.
You're like a new mom. I think, what were your children, were about like 1 and 4 or something?
That's right. Yep.
Back then?
Yep.
So how did you find it?
So I have a wonderful friend named Kristen who was going through breast cancer treatment, and she was 42 years old, so she's 10 years older than I am. And I had been hanging out with her. Our husbands actually both coach hockey together, so they had a alumni barbecue at our house, and Kristen was going through treatment, and the kids were getting antsy. She has kids too, and so I said, let me drive her young son home and I'll see her and see how she's doing. And so I did, and when I got back that night, I was watching the Summer Olympics with my husband and said, gosh, she's so young and I've never even checked. And so I just sat on the sofa and started poking around, and I felt the lump that night almost immediately. And so I made an appointment to have it checked out, and saw my PCP, and she was very confident it was a cyst. I was so young, no family history. She kind of was hesitant to send me for a mammogram, but she did the next day, and I thought nothing of it. I'm like, I just have to check this off. This is done, And so I went for the mammogram. They saw it, and so I went for the ultrasound immediately after, and the radiologist told me on the ultrasound table he saw an invasive tumor. And that was that.
Wow. Like, look at that, in 24 hours, how your life changes.
It's truly unbelievable. Yeah.
Well, interesting. By helping a friend who was going through her own breast cancer treatment, made you come back home and say, wow, if it could happen to her and she's so young, I've never even looked. Because a lot of women, they hear about breast self-exam, but they don't really do it.
Right.
Especially when they're younger.
Right. And I had just had my annual physical June, so a few months before, and she had done an exam and didn't feel anything.
Didn't feel anything.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well, so many breast cancers are found. In fact, I hear there are more breast cancers found actually in self-exams or clinical exams than there are found in mammograms.
Wow.
So this is good proof that you really have to check your own body. And is that what one of your main pieces of advice would be after what you've been through?
It is. It's hard for me because I think I have the words of my oncologist kind of ringing in my head, and he's very scientific, and he cites a study that the survival rates are not changed by self-exams, and I think I heard the prior doctor speaking of, that it's controversial. So I always have that running through my head, but even I pushed him on it and said, but you said, that finding it was miraculous. And so he says, I know. And so then he kind of comes back to, yes, I do recommend that people do it. So it's interesting.
Yeah, because I'm at this point in time, I believe in being honest about everything.
Yeah.
I had not done a breast self-exam.
Yeah.
And I did stories on it a million times, but
Right.
I'd not done it. I always got it every year clinically when I went to my gynecologist.
That's what I figured it was being covered.
And I would go for my mammogram, so I figured I was doing everything that you're supposed to do.
Right.
But I hear more and more women tell me now, gee, I heard you talk about this, and I all of a sudden thought maybe I should try. And I looked, and lo and behold, we found breast cancer. So it seems to me that women can be their own best health advocate.
Absolutely, and I think that even, I can't speak to the science of it, but I think that emotionally, to know that you were on top of your own body and that, that you did the most you could do, that I think is a huge piece of it. So even, finding it for your early for your own emotional well-being, never mind the clinical piece of it, is really important.
And the second thing is that you probably thought, that can't be. But it sounds like your doctor also, at first, rightfully said, what are you talking about? You're too young for this.
Yep.
A lot of young women are sent away.
Yes.
We'll take another look in a few months.
Yep, definitely. And she even pressed on it and said, does it hurt? And I said, yes. And she said, well, then it's a cyst. And so, and I think it's, split-second decisions. And, I could have skipped the mammogram, gotten on my train and gone to work. And, and I think those split-second decisions where you go one way instead of going the other can make a huge difference. And we probably do them every day and we don't even know.
So what was your diagnosis?
So it was triple positive breast cancer. So
Do you want to explain what that is?
Sure. So it was estrogen receptor positive, progesterone receptor positive, and HER2 positive. And so it was, it had not reached the lymph nodes yet. Once they went in for, I had a double mastectomy, and once they went in and tested the sentinel lymph node, it had not reached the lymph nodes yet. And so I actually have never had the guts to fully confirm, and I, unlike you who does so much research and knows so much, I am still slightly scared of all of that information. I never looked at any paper that officially confirmed the stage of it, but as I understand it, that would make it a stage 1 breast cancer.
Well, that's good though, stage 1. I mean, that means that because you came home that day and kind of said, oh my gosh, she's so young to have breast cancer, and that prompted you, that you probably saved your life because you found it early.
I hope so.
Yes. So see, we all do that, right?
Yeah.
We all say, I hope so.
Yeah.
But you got to keep your head up.
Yeah.
Well, we'll get to that because you have to have hope at the breakfast table, right? But first of all, you got this diagnosis and you have 2 little children, 4 and 1. I mean, I know as a mom how hard it was. So tell me how did you tell friends, family?
It's really hard, I think, that piece of it. And because you're concerned about them, how are they going to be? And you're also not in a place where you're able to help them. I mean, you could barely help yourself, or I could barely help myself at that point. So I wrote an email, and it was the morning after I had the official biopsy results back, which was just the day after the mammogram and the ultrasound. And I wrote them an email. I was up really, really early in the morning, terrified, and didn't know what to do. It was 3. My kids weren't going to get up. I definitely wasn't going back to sleep. So I wrote an email to them, and I told them, and I just said I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and this isn't a secret. We're all going to need help, clearly, and so that was the initial way,
and then the call started.
And then, and texts, and now it's definitely that. But I didn't want it was mainly my mother and my husband who I knew it would all fall on to answer all those calls, because also people, I think, they're afraid to call and they're afraid to reach out. And so they'd funnel it through those close to me. And so I knew that they were going to be hugely burdened, and by love, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's a lot for them. So the next day when I was up again at 3, I said, maybe I don't want to write another email, but it felt good to write that email. It felt like I got something out. And, but then I said, but some people might not want the email, so how can I do this so that it's in a place where people can go and get it if they want it, but not necessarily have to get it? And I had honestly never read a blog. I had never obviously written a blog. And I Googled start a blog, and there it was, and I just started one.
So that's how it started, like literally 2 days in. The inspiration came from that cathartic feeling.
Oh, totally.
That therapeutic, just writing
Putting
and
it
getting
out.
your fears and your concerns out on paper.
Yes, exactly. That was it. It was just wonderfully therapeutic, and I needed that. And it gave me something to do truthfully in hours of the morning that I didn't know what to do with, and that were my scariest, I think. So I started it, and it just became such an important part of my treatment. And and people started reading it all over the world. My brother, was like the techie in the family, hooked it up to Google Analytics and would show me where everyone was reading it, and it was so amazing to think that someone in Iran was reading the story, and I don't know who that is, but.
And were you amazed at how many people take the time to then send you? I mean, it's just the idea that someone will take the time out of their day that might not even know you,
right,
to send you well wishes and to cheer you on and say,
it's
"Don't worry, you'll beat this."
Yeah, it's I mean, you probably know that more than anyone, but it's unbelievable, and I think I felt it tangible sometimes, in moments where I was really scared, and I can remember so vividly, and I write about it in the book. Changing out of my clothes to go in for my double mastectomy and standing in the bathroom alone and like just standing there feeling like that people were all these good, I'll be thinking about you tomorrow, I'll be praying for you, and it's like I just stopped for a second and it was almost like a type of prayer where I felt that it's very helpful, and I think now I'm more conscious of it and I do it more to others because I've seen how helpful it can be.
Yeah, it's a healing power source, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, I really know. I learned about the power of support, the healing power of support.
So true.
And certainly did the same thing you did with the blogging and the video blogging. And I think it lets you get everything out as opposed to just keeping it inside your head, right, which is what gets you up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
What did you have to do? What was your course of treatment?
So I did the bilateral mastectomy 5 weeks out of my diagnosis. So I didn't know the stage of the cancer or anything until that surgery. So those 5 weeks were very hard because they couldn't test, without testing the lymph node, they wouldn't know how far it had gone. I was getting information back about the HER2 and stuff like that, but I didn't know. So I did the bilateral mastectomy, reconstruction in that first surgery, and then 5 weeks after that, I did chemotherapy and began the Herceptin, which I'm sure is a drug you know a lot about, and obviously very key for people with HER2-positive breast cancer. So I began that. Unfortunately, I had an anaphylactic reaction to my chemotherapy on the second round.
Now, what happened when that happened? Because this is why they give you the Benadryl and all these different things, so you don't have that happen. But can you take us through what happened? You're in the chemo chair. They've got you hooked up. Yep. Were you going through AC at this point?
So no, I was going through the Cytoxan and Taxotere. So it was the Taxotere that did it. And so I had they always would start the infusion with the Herceptin. So that was the shorter infusion, and we would start with that. So I had that. That was fine. It was half hour, done. Then they come in with the bag of the, Taxol, essentially. It's in the same family. Yep. And the nurse was standing next to me, and actually she was standing there, and we had just put together, as she was standing there, types the buttons in to kind of start it, and we put together that we grew up in the same hometown. So we're just talking about people that we know. It was crazy because I had had her before, and we had no idea we had this connection. And just immediately, I felt like a fire was lit in my entire body, and it was a matter of seconds, and it was truthfully like, I can't describe it any other way. Everything was on fire, and I just keeled over, and I couldn't breathe. Everything was closed, and my eyes were just within a matter of seconds, everything. And they have their code, whatever they have, and I honestly would say it was a matter of, it couldn't have been more than a minute, that there were just this team around me. And I was bent over, I couldn't even sit up, but I could feel that they all had their jobs and they were just doing things, and I don't know what they were doing. And so they were able to, my blood pressure had fallen significantly, and they, brought me back and, pumped me with all sorts of things that would get it to go down. And that was only a couple of drops of the chemo, so it was very significant allergic reaction. I've never had an allergy to anything either, so it was shocking, no pun intended, and it was scary after that because to have a course of treatment thrown off that way, so unexpected. So I ended up having to wait for an allergist, figuring that out, and then going into a desensitization program here where they were still able to administer the chemotherapy.
So that you could still go back and take that same
Yeah, the same drug that did that. Yeah.
How scary was that going back in? Oh my
scary.
gosh.
It was very scary. But they did it out of the intensive care unit, and they did it very, very slowly.
Yeah.
And they have this amazing protocol that a scientist has developed that can somehow take someone who's deathly allergic to a drug and still get it in them. Wow. And they did. It's unbelievable. So I got it, and it took a couple. I was there for 2 nights, but we did it, and then we did it again, and then we did it again, and we had the four courses done. So it's amazing what they can do.
It really is. I mean, we're so fortunate in a way to have had our breast cancer experience at a time when medicine is so amazing.
Exactly.
Back you up for just a second, because you write about it.
Yeah.
You write about the decision to have the mastectomy and to have reconstruction, and you talk about when you were going bald, and I love that you wrote that your son said, "Don't worry about being bald, Mommy. They'll still know you're a girl because you wear a dress."
And I very rarely wear dresses.
But it's out of the mouth of babes, is it not?
I know.
That can bring us around sometimes to feeling a little bit more like we can deal with things. Did you find that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think having kids, in some way, people always say they were so young, that must have been so hard, and in a way, I'd imagine it just helped, because there's such a release, and there's such, really they didn't care that I was bald. They couldn't have cared less. I mean, it was the initial shock, I think, especially with my 1-year-old. But after that, it was fuzzy and and they just, they're so resilient,
But did you have an initial reaction? I know I had an initial reaction, kind of like that protective lioness.
Yeah.
That I didn't want to tell him because I didn't want him to be worried or be scared.
Absolutely. You don't want to bring anything bad into your house, right? And so we didn't say cancer for a while. Actually, probably it was weeks, if not months, that we used that word. And that was only after I spoke to a wonderful psychologist here that I call my therapy lady. She actually wrote the foreword to the book, and she works with people on speaking to their children about it. So she said it's okay to use that word, and you can use it with them. And so they had already known that there was something in me that we needed to get taken out, and it would require a surgery, and the medicine that would make sure it didn't come back was a medicine that would make me lose my hair. They knew all that. We hadn't used the word cancer. Mainly
it's a scary word. It's a scary word to adults. Yes. It's a scary word for us to say. I mean, I found it very hard to make calls and say, I have cancer. And, it's just kind of the world we live in.
Yeah.
But in the past, it's been such a death sentence that, now people haven't quite caught up with the fact that many cancers, including breast cancer, people can live through and beyond it.
Exactly.
Now, you talked about the book, so let me just say, this is Tara Schumann's book. It's called Hope is a Good Breakfast. And actually, this started as the blog, right? The blog you started writing right away. Did you name it right away?
So I named it right away, Tara Beats Cancer. Okay. And I don't know if you've had this sort of a evolution you're thinking, but the idea of beating cancer has changed a lot for me as I've gone through it. And so I've kind of come to not be a huge fan of that name anymore. It just is where people go to read the blog, so I've left it as Tara Beats Cancer. But
that's okay. Mine started out with I Will Survive.
Right.
But that's not what I named the book.
Right.
It was Had I Known, a memoir of survival.
Right.
But you go through this process of being fighter, warrior, I'm going to beat this disease, and then you move on to HOPE, right?
Yeah.
So what was that transition? And when did it come?
So I think I'd say it came in a way gradually. I think it came a lot through people I've met that that might not be able to beat cancer in the way that we have, that I originally conceived of it, which is that they, that we don't die of cancer. And I think, initially that survival mode of I will survive, it's that it helps, and it really helped me. And
you need to kind of
absolutely
like put
mobilize.
it on. You need to put it on like a uniform, right?
Absolutely, and it really does help. And I don't downplay that for anyone that needs that, and it's invaluable. But I think as you move on and you meet people, and you start to accept, the reality of what it is, and it becomes a little bit deeper than that. And so the quote is actually a Francis Bacon quote, and it's "Hope is a good breakfast, but it's a bad supper," and that's the full quote. And
okay, so to kind of give us the meaning of that.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think it's something for everyone to think about. The way I think about it, at least one way I think about it, is that hope is priceless. It's so precious. I can't even begin to articulate, despite that I've written a lot about it, how powerful it is to believe that, in a time that you can't see how anything could be better, that maybe it could be better, and it's amazing. At the same time, there's a lot that needs to be done, and there's a lot that needs to be done in science, in education, in the media, in politics. There's a lot of work that still has to happen. And I interpret his quote, at least in my own life, to be, I'm not just going to just hope. I'm going to put that out. I'm going to do something too to try to make those things real, and to raise money for research happening here, to talk about things that other people are maybe going through who can't talk about it and yet feel less alone when they read about it. And so that's what I think it's evolved in for me, is just something. I think a lot of people throw around the word hope, without that sort of depth that when you're really using it, you start to recognize the depth of it.
It's so interesting, because I remember when I was in the beginning of my treatment, and I kept hearing all these people say, you come into breast cancer one person and you go out another. And of course now I totally get it.
Yeah.
And I keep hearing it in one survivor after another, and one woman after another. They're almost compelled. You almost feel this compelling desire or need to try to help other women through their breast cancer journey once you've come through it and you're on the other side.
Yeah.
I'm sensing that in you, obviously.
I've read that you wrote that, you've said that. I love that. I think it's so true, and I think there's also an element of, I think all those things that new woman has, the old woman had too, just hadn't surfaced yet, hadn't had a reason to surface. And I think that that's, I think I'm in many ways the same person I was, but in many ways so different. And I think it's just showed me, how vulnerable we all are. And like, if you want something, now's the time,
Well, I love your mantra that you talk about. Your mantra is, I am here now.
Yeah,
Did I get that right?
That's right.
Is that partly that you don't want to look down, and that you just have to kind of keep your head up and not be afraid of the future? I think if I remember how you said it, I'm not afraid of the future, but I don't count on it necessarily.
Right.
So you live full in the moment?
I try to, but that's a really hard thing to do.
It is hard.
I think that it's the future. I never comprehended that thinking about the future could be scary until a cancer diagnosis, and someone would even bring up something that was happening next year, or even something good, and like someone's wedding, and it was this like rush of sheer terror of like, will I be here for that? What will I look like for that? What will I feel like? And And I think in those moments of just real overwhelming fear, to just back up and just say, I don't know, but I know that right now where I'm standing is where I'm standing, and my kids are over there and they're there and I'm here.
I am here.
Yeah, and so it just really helped me, those
Has
words.
how many years out are you?
So I'll be 3 years, if you count from diagnosis, in August. Yeah.
3 years. So has that concern about, am I going to be around for so-and-so's party or whatever it is a year from now, has that subsided? Have you been able to like tuck it in the back pocket or put it in perspective, so to speak, or is it still somewhat prevalent? Does it take realistically, does it stay with you for a few years after?
It's a really good question. It definitely has subsided for me on a moment-to-moment, day-to-day basis. Okay. But I will say that when a friend has a recurrence, or when they get bad news, and they're going through treatment even for a recurrence and it's going well, and then all of a sudden a scan comes back badly. I just went through genetic mapping and just got the results back yesterday, and waiting for those results brought it all back again. So I think there are pieces, there are spikes, I guess you could say, of that sort of fear again, but absolutely it has subsided on a moment-to-moment, day-to-day basis. And I'm making a career change, and I've been going through a job search and have talked about the future and been able to talk about where I had a principal ask me, where do you want to be in 5 years? And it was a little bit of a gulp, and in my head I said alive, and outwardly I gave her a real answer, and so I think that's not something I would have been able to do a couple years ago, so it absolutely gets better.
But I'm hearing that this challenging moment in life is probably the most challenge anybody will face. It really had a profound impact on you.
Oh,
I mean, here you are changing careers. Do you think that would have happened otherwise?
I wanted it to happen, and like I said, with the kind of surfacing, I don't think I would have had the guts to do it. And now it's, to be honest, I made that real decision to do it when another friend of mine had her cancer come back last summer, and I said, if mine were to come back, where do I want to be and what do I want to be doing? And I was walking to work, and it wasn't that. And so I said I want to be a teacher again, and so that's what I'm going to do.
I think it's almost like you put a new pair of glasses on, and it changes your focus on the world. And do you find that you're more appreciative of even the silly things, a sunny day?
Yeah.
In a new way?
Absolutely, in a new way. And the funny thing was, I was appreciative before. I was like, it was a really strange, my mom and I would joke darkly when I was diagnosed, because I always, something would happen, and I'd be like, oh, at least none of us have cancer. I mean, we would joke, like we would keep life in perspective. And so it was kind of a strange thing when all of a sudden I did. But yeah, you just have such a new perspective, I think.
And it also allows you to fully understand how much your family and friends will rally around you. There's some saying that, you need to let those who love you have an opportunity to really love you.
Oh, yeah.
And that certainly does come true when you go through an experience like this, doesn't it?
Couldn't be more true. In the last chapter of the book, I write about, I call it my ship, and it's a metaphor to basically my ship of people that I'm sailing through life with, and that I choose to sail through life with. And even tomorrow night, we decided we'd have a party for the book, to launch the book, and it started as something small, and tomorrow night it'll be 450 people. And the first part I'm going to read when I speak is my ship, and talk about that this is my ship, and I'm so blessed to have all these people have done countless different things that they might have thought were small, but when you put them all together, they carried us through it.
I hear from so many women who, they're coming through it the same way. They're like, whew, I made it. I need to do something. I need to make my life count. I think that's what I hear in a lot of them. And they, do you have any suggestions? How can I help? you're doing it. I mean, you're coming back here to Dana-Farber. You're helping. You come and help go through, take patients to sessions, I'm told.
Oh.
What is you're kind of walking your talk.
Oh, I'm just doing what people did for me and what I know those people will do for other people. I'm not doing anything, anything really. I don't know. Even the book, I mean, that helped me to write that book, and
but it will help countless more women.
I
mean, it is
love
therapeutic for us to write and blog and write books and do all this. But the end result is that there are women out there who are struggling, who are alone, who don't have support systems like you had and like I had.
Yeah.
And they're having a much tougher time going through their journey.
Absolutely. And I think the feeling of being alone is one of the scariest feelings I think that people can face. And the best, the biggest gift I can ever receive is when someone says, I've read it, or I read a blog, or I read the book, and I feel less alone. Like, I feel like you're there with me, and truthfully, I wish I could go to, I was, had gone to an appointment with a friend who was just diagnosed, and it was here last week, and I wish I could do that for every, person that it would help, but I can't, but I can have that book be available to them, and so it's like to know that what I wish I could give someone is in a place where they can now, get it. It feels good.
For the women who are out there watching, what advice would you give them if they're, let's say if they're newly diagnosed, and then I'd also like you to just talk about, what about the circles of support and how they can help? Because a lot of people want to be helpful to someone going through it, but they don't really know how to approach it.
Yeah. That is so hard because the overwhelming fear that I think a lot of people feel, where you can't even quite grasp what you need done, it's hard to say, well, get it together and decide who should cook and who should do that. But you're almost at the point where you don't even know what needs to be done, And so
when someone asks you, what can I do for you, they don't realize how hard a question that is.
Right. And so I think, it would almost be educating the caregivers, to say that when someone is diagnosed around you, I think, one, don't be scared of them. I think that there's that, I don't want to interrupt, or I don't want to get in the way, or I don't want to go over, what if they're, and it's okay, just drop it off and leave it on the stoop. I think I will never forget anything that a card people gave me, a gift. It means so much to know that you've got that support. And so I'd say don't be afraid of them. I'd also say, don't say, call me if you need anything. Just do something, and
bake a casserole.
Right.
Whatever.
Right. And truthfully, even on the practical side, they have amazing calendars now. My best friend set up this calendar where people could literally, it's called My Lifeline, and you can plug in like when you want. So we had plugged in, my husband likes to cook, and he didn't want, his job kind of being taken over. And so we would do, we would sign up for 3 days a week, and we knew who was coming and when they were coming. And
that's amazing. So let's say, wait a second, this is called mylifeline.org.
Yeah. And it's unbelievable. You can literally set up, I need a ride on this day, I need a meal on this day. And it was just wonderful because it organized us all. It can be very overwhelming to get all that, and you've got fridge full of food that then you worry about wasting, and then someone, you throw it out, and then you feel bad that and this kind of structure that even the calendar gave us was so nice, and babysitting. I mean, it's really unbelievable.
What a fantastic piece of advice.
Yeah.
That's so helpful.
And I think the different areas, so there was my husband's work people and my work people and our friends, and to be able to say, there's one calendar, here it is, type in, you know, what you can do, and it was wonderful. So that was really helpful. And then, what was your first question?
And then
about?
also, I find that everywhere I go, now that everybody knows that I've had cancer, that instead of saying, "Hi, how you doing? How are the kids?" it's always, "How are you?"
Yes, the very.
I was
deep,
fine until you asked them that way, you know, because everybody
with those
means
eyes.
so well.
Right.
It does change it changes life. You have a new normal. Have you gotten used to your new normal yet?
I don't know. I don't know what it is yet. It's come with a lot of really exciting, you know, the book and changing jobs, and I think my new normal is just appreciating that I am here now, and that I, you know, trying to really just accept that I don't know what my future will look like, and that's okay. You know, for good, there are really good things that could happen. I don't know what they're going to be, you know, and just as there are bad things. So I think that's the new normal, is just getting to a level of acceptance that is helpful for me.
I think that that's going to be helpful for a lot of people out there listening, and I thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.